On today's show, the ultimate preview of Mavericks Clippers Part 3, going to be joined by the host of Locked On Mavs, Nick Angstadt, to talk all things Clippers Mavs Part 3 on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, born and raised in LA, and in my 19th season as a Clipper fan. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod, and subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA Clipper and LA sports content. And Locked On Clippers is free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. I want you to let me know your series prediction and go say something to Locked On Mavs. Go to the Locked On Mavs channel and just remind them what the Clippers' record in the playoffs is against Dallas, because they want to remind us that we don't have a ring, this and that. Go remind them who Kawhi Leonard is relative to their franchise. But this episode's going to be great. Went through a lot of different things with Nick about the Mavs, about the Clippers. This first one is a little bit more Dallas-centric, so expect more talk about their team than the second chapter. So there's going to be another episode coming out on Thursday that's going to be more Clipper focused. And then even after we were done, we were like, we still have some things we left out. So we did even bonus episode, like a 5 or 10 minute bonus to add on anything we forgot. So it's as detailed as it can get. The only thing I forgot is that Zubac might sometimes switch, or they might have Zubac guard Derrick Jones Jr. to keep him out of the pick and roll action sometimes to start games. That's something I forgot to mention in the series, but I'll talk about that on Friday's episode. But for now, to the episode with Nick Angstadt and yours truly. Enjoy. Here we are, the first crossover ever of my time being Locked On Clippers host. And it's funny because I talk to Nick the most, but Nick Angstadt of Locked On Mavs. Here we go, round 3.
Let's go. Are you ready for it? Are you ready for round 3 of this?
I'm extremely ready.
Are you ready? Are you ready for one more time? Maybe not once more. Maybe it's not the last time, but you'll have to deal with. Are you ready for that? Are you ready for that again in the playoffs?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So that's the biggest thing. Can we beat Luka Doncic 3 times? Can the Clippers do this 3 times? And it's a very different side of both teams, different version of both teams.
Yeah, it absolutely is. These are very different teams that we're seeing now. The Mavericks especially. The Mavericks are a different team right now than they were like in January. This team's completely different. This team used to be a team that just relied on the 3, a team that, live and die by the 3. Jason Kidd would say that over and over again. And then in pressers, he would say, look, we're a team that we've got to score 130 points if the other team, because the other team's going to score 120 or 125 every time. We saw it. One of the Clippers Mavs games was like 140 to 120 this season. And now this Mavericks team is completely different. They've added some defense. They've added some size for sure. The Gafford Lively pairing is great. Putting Maxey back into the role where he can be a 5 if he needs to. He can play next to a different 5, and so you don't have to rely on him to be that guy. That's been a real luxury for them. PJ Washington has been an amazing addition. His defense has been better than even I expected for the Mavericks, and so this team is completely different, and they're different from 20 and 21, the last time these two teams faced in the playoffs, because of Kyrie. Like, do you remember who the second leading scorer was in those series? It was Tim Hardaway Jr. It was Tim Hardaway Jr. One game, it was Trey Burke. He scored 25 points in game 4 in 2020. This Mavericks team has not had this second guy. Jalen Brunson was not this guy back when these two teams played before. And I'm fascinated to see how Kyrie fits into the second guy next to Luka, the release valve next to Luka, because all the pressure is going to go on Luka, and then all of a sudden you've got Kyrie, and these guys can score one-on-one, and they've got every option in front of them. And I'm fascinated to see how those two work together in the playoffs, because we did not get to see it last year, and that was terrible.
Yeah, that's obviously the fear from Clipper fans' end, is that Luka Doncic took us to 7 games with not having a reliable number 2. Obviously, there was the whole controversy with Porzingis and how he was being used, and him not being happy with that eventually led to the trade. But
the controversy, by the way, was from Porzingis.
Right.
It was from no one else. He had become that player. Just they stuck him in the corner, and that's the way he had played all season.
Yeah, but now you have a bona fide, not just a great number two option, but someone who has won the championship as a number two option. Obviously, people that are skeptical of Kyrie Irving will say that was 8 years ago, and I'm guessing we'll talk about Kyrie and his question marks going into the playoffs, because there are some from other people. I don't know about Mavs fans. Their confidence level in Kyrie is probably higher, but there are, especially on the Clippers side, I've heard so many Clipper fans say, well, Kyrie Irving, like, what's he done in the playoffs recently since LeBron? And you know people have said that, and I know Kyrie's aware of that as well. The thing with the Clippers that's made them so different, obviously, than 2021 is you mentioned Dallas having a second guy now. Well, now the Clippers have a third guy. And Reggie Jackson, right, for what it's worth, I made sure I had to troll the Mavs fans just a little bit with this Reggie Jackson shirt.
You're either trolling the Mavs or you're trolling the current Nuggets right now. either
right.
way.
The Reggie Jackson, though, I would always make jokes, funny enough, that he kind of transformed into like a discount Kyrie for us with the shots he was making and the insane things he was doing in that 2021 playoff run. But now we have James Harden, who in the third option role, the only time we've seen him since OKC was Brooklyn. And there's a lot of people that believe that had their Kyrie Irving and James Harden not been injured, that they would have won the championship or beaten Milwaukee. So James Harden is now in what people believe is the best role for him to win a championship. And there's been definitely two versions of James Harden this year, which is, I think, what this series is really going to come down to, besides, of course, the obvious Kawhi Leonard's health. But that's the main difference between the Clippers for me, is we don't have as many wings. We used to have a lot of wings. Nicholas Batum, Marcus Morris. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anyone else in that 2021, but it was mainly Marcus Morris and Nicholas Batum. And then we had Terrence Mann come in, and Pat Bev gave some minutes here and there. But 2021, the Mavericks played Pat Bev kind of off the floor. He wasn't really that used. He was coming off an injury, so
it was like immediate. It was like within the first couple minutes of the first game, we're like, oh God, he can't play in the series.
Well, I vividly remember the second game I was at. Luka took Pat Bev right to the basket and gone and one. And I was like, yeah, we can't switch Pat Bev onto Luka anymore. And he didn't become a big impact piece for the Clippers that playoff run till the second round in the conference finals. But that my main difference is the Clippers were more of a wing heavy roster before, and now we don't have those wings. We don't have the same defensive personnel, but we do have James Harden, which has made us one of the better offensive teams in the league.
Yeah, I said on my show the other day, the two swing players of the series are Harden and Kyrie. I think we know what we're getting from Luka. We know what we're getting from Paul George, and if Kawhi plays, which I'm assuming he plays, I'm just going to assume that Kawhi is going to come in and be completely fine in game one. Like that's what I'm assuming, even though there is concerns and all this. And by the time you're listening to this, you may know more, but I'm assuming he's going to play. But I think Harden and Kyrie are the two swing players because, yeah, I think there has been some question about Kyrie. All the risks and stuff that they took when they made the trade, like none of those have come to fruition at all in any way. But now you look at, okay, we can just focus on basketball. You don't have to focus on any of the off-the-court stuff anymore. And there's kind of some question about, all right, well, how are Luka and Kyrie going to defend in the playoffs when it comes down to it, when one of those guys is going to have to defend one of the three on the Clippers, right? I mean, you got Derek Jones and you got PJ Washington, and then is it Kyrie taking Harden? Is it Luka taking Harden? I mean, defense in the NBA is no longer just this like one-on-one. You got to guard the person in front of you. Everybody's going to be moving around and all that. So Luka and Kyrie will guard everybody at some point with all the switches and stuff. But yeah, the question is going to be, how can, a smaller guard like Kyrie hold up in that anymore in the NBA? And he was okay for I thought he was okay for like a star player with Boston and with Brooklyn. But you go back to how he played with the Cavs back with LeBron. And I think setting him next to a guy that's that playmaker that controls that much attention, he did not have that in Boston. And KD's just not that same type of player that Luka and LeBron are. Like they're just more of the playmakers, for as great as KD is. And so I think that Kyrie is also like for the same thing that Harden is, like in his best spot right now. I think Kyrie is in his best spot right now too, because he can float in and out of the game. He doesn't have to control it at any point. And then all of a sudden, when the Mavs need something, he can turn it on no matter what. And that's what Brunson had really figured out by the end, is I have to be able to turn it on immediately and then go get a bucket and go get this. And Kyrie's one of the best in the NBA. Just go get me a bucket, right? Like he made a career out of going and getting a bucket with a fake beard and, and wrinkles on. And so he did that and made a movie, and then he in the NBA he's been amazing at that. And so I'm fascinated at those two players. I think they're the real swing players of this series. And whoever, I don't know, do you think it's whoever has the best series between Harden and Kyrie wins the series?
Not quite, actually. I'm very much pro that kind of stuff when it comes to the best players. Although with this series, as you said, Luka and Kawhi are just fairly reliable in the playoffs, to put it lightly. So you know what you're probably going to get from them. I actually, and the Clipper fans might not like this, but I have more faith in Kyrie Irving in his role than James Harden performing in his. And it's only because I saw Kyrie Irving do it at the highest level. And I personally don't think he's gotten much worse as a player at all. Whereas James Harden, he's coming off a major hamstring injury that has significantly, because if people remember James Harden in 2021, he was literally an MVP candidate. Kyrie and KD, especially KD, missed a lot of games. Remember, Brooklyn had only played like 14 games or something with the big three. So Harden actually really shouldered that load for Brooklyn that whole season and was, I believe, third in the MVP race after Steph Curry and Jokic. Or Embiid and Jokic. I remember that was the year for Jokic's first MVP, but I remember Harden was in the mix, and he's not quite that same guy. And of course, there are a lot of postseason question marks around both, but James Harden does get the he's never won a ring kind of skepticism. And to be honest, James Harden, he has picked it up over the last 2-3 weeks, but he had a stretch in March and the beginning of April, and he was not looking the same as December and January. And I know you're going to end up asking about what the biggest change was, and that was the biggest change, is James Harden's offensive production. Whereas Kyrie Irving, he looks pretty good. I've been watching some of the games. He looks pretty good. He made that amazing game winner against Denver. I think he's been defending better all season than I've seen him in the past. And he had some huge scoring games towards the end of the season. So I think I agree with everything you're saying. This is the most functional situation that Kyrie Irving has been in since probably the 2017-18 Celtics season, when he was actually going well before he got hurt. And as you said, he's not really the point guard now like he was for Boston. I think when you saw him play with Brooklyn, he was kind of the second scorer after KD, but he touched the ball the third most. But you saw that Kyrie's role, he wants to get buckets. Like he's an underrated passer in my opinion, but he's a score first kind of guy. He has a score first, attack first mentality. And when you put him next to a guy like LeBron or Luka, I think that's ideally the best role for him. So that's why I'm a little more confident in Kyrie. But overall, no, I don't think it's going to come down to us a better series between those two. But I will say this, if the Clippers win, whether Kawhi plays or not, they're going to need a good James Harden. I don't believe that they can win with James Harden playing badly. And that doesn't necessarily mean scoring a lot, but he's got to be creating offensively. And as you said, Derrick Jones and PJ Washington will start off on Kawhi and Paul George most likely as the primary defenders. And there is going to be switching. But if you're the Clippers and Kyrie Irving's guarding James Harden, forget the switch. Let's put Gafford in the pick and roll and run James Harden, Zubac's pick and roll bread and butter and see if Kyrie can guard at the point of attack. I think that's absolutely something we're going to see a lot of.
If Zubac is still there.
Oh, is that the conversation we're having next?
Oh, yeah. Let's get to it.
Coming up, going to be talking about why Nick thinks the Mavericks are better equipped to beat the Clippers this time around, and just how big is Ivica Zubac's impact relative to the 2021 Clipper team when at times he was played off the floor. Going to be talking about that coming up. I got to tell you a little something about Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. Nissan's incredible lineup also includes the 2024 Nissan Armada. It'll change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Tow bigger and explore further in the 2024 Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. I got to tell you a little something about Monopoly Go. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard's not looking good. You're feeling low, you're not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep. Lift your head up and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, the greatest board game of all time that you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play Store. So, Ivica Zubac he's basically anchored our defense this entire season. I think he's one of the better drop defenders in the league. But of course, if you recall, he hasn't had much success against the Mavericks and Luka. But I will say this. I don't think this series comes down to, some Mavericks fans that are very confident are saying, well, we took the Clippers to 7 games without a co-star, so now we're for sure going to beat them. And I think that's only looking at it from the Mavericks lens, whereas the Clippers, not everything was set in stone, and we were the best versions of ourselves in those first 2 games. Ty Lue had an amazing first regular season as our coach, and then the playoffs started, and he was making really weird decisions. Like Zubac just switching on to Luka for 2 games, and I want to say the first quarter of the 3rd game when you remember Dallas was killing us, 32-13 or something in the first quarter.
Remember, they should have gone up 3-0 after that. Oh,
Zoo was just being allowed to switch on to Luka over and over because, of course, they are afraid that in drop coverage, Luka's getting downhill and now you have problems. The point is you have problems either way with Luka, no matter what. So I don't see, because we haven't done it all season, Ty Lue starting with Zoo switching on to Luka. The only reason he tries that is because he believes that Luka's not super quick and he can somewhat be a big body that deters him, but Luka's just so good with the handle. He creates the space for that step back 3, and weirdly you think, Zoo's getting a contest in there, he's still putting a hand up, but that shot, I don't think Luka even sees the contest half the time with that step back. It's really just a matter of if it goes in, it goes in. And Zoo's not really putting pressure on the ball to make him, rush his movement or anything like that. So if we switch Zoo on to Luka, it's going to be absolute problems, but I expect Ty Lue to go with what we've seen all season, which is Zubac in drop coverage. And that's the thing. If we get exposed there, it's a real conversation. Is Zoo going to be not, utilized a lot? Because I'm telling you, yeah.
If you're going to play in drop coverage against Luka and against Kyrie, you're going to get exposed there. I mean, you just can't, I don't think you can do that in general. And so, I agree that Zubac has been very good defensively in drop coverage and all that this season. And his success has been a lot of the Clippers' success. And, he's career high in scoring, and that pick and roll with him and Harden, I think, has been a big difference to why this Clippers offense is so much better than it's been in the past. But I don't know if you can even play drop against Luka and Kyrie. They're just too good at the pull-up shots and then anything in the pick and roll. And they've got actual screeners now. It's not Dwight Powell anymore. It's Gafford and Lively and and anybody, and honestly anybody. That's the one thing about this Mavs offense is that they can call up anybody. Hey, we want to go against Terrence Mann. Hey, we want to go against Zubac. Hey, we want to do this. We call up anybody. PJ, Derrick Jones Jr., Kyrie, come screen for Luka. It could be any single player that come up and screen for Luka, and they're gonna make something happen.
Yeah, especially Kyrie Irving coming off screens for pull up mid ranges. That's what he does. So, I think one thing I want to say to both sets of fans is, the regular season matchups between these two teams, you can throw those completely out the window. I mean, that was not the same Dallas Maverick team. So I think, that those matchups mean absolutely nothing. And especially, also the first one where the Mavericks destroyed us. You mentioned the score. It was 144-126, if I'm not mistaken. That was the Brian Damaris game. The star of the series. The star of the series.
You're the problem, James Harden.
I mean, that
look
guy,
in the mirror.
That guy's face is going to be all over this social media this series. It's going to be crazy.
if James Harden, and I hope that it's like Mavs win in 5 and they get one game where James Harden hits a game winner or something, and Harden comes up to the mic and goes, "Who's the problem now?" Like how funny would that be?
We lose in 5 though.
No, I'm just saying, like in the middle of this series, like I'm just saying, I kind of hope that happens. That if the Mavs lose one of the games of the series, that it's James Harden that hits a game winner, and he comes up and does that.
That would be funny. But that game, what I was saying was, you can't really take anything from it because that's before Russell Westbrook was even put on the bench, and I haven't even mentioned his name yet. But
yeah.
the thing about Russ is, when you give him extended minutes to really put his imprint on the game. Of course, we've seen that it can go really badly at times, but when it goes well, that guy can affect a game in so many ways. And that grittiness, that toughness is huge for playoff basketball. As much as people want to give Russell Westbrook a hard time for some of his playoff struggles, we also have seen him have amazing playoff games over the years. And one of them was an example of last year, or an example was one of them last year against the Suns when we still had Kawhi playing. He went 3 for 19 in the game and still made huge plays defensively, had that block against Devin Booker and knocked it off his leg, and made big free throws, got huge offensive rebounds. So, with James Harden, all of the stuff that he does well is going to be, on the ball, creation, shot making. But Westbrook, he gives you those intangibles, those hustle plays. And what I'm really interested, though, is how much Ty Lue's going to use him, because that's been a point of controversy all season long, is the usage of Westbrook, the leash.
He was good against Luka, like defending Luka in one of the matchups this season too. And that was something that I found really fascinating because he's kind of turned into this 6-man energy hustle guy. And if you're playing Westbrook, how many minutes is he playing this season? If you're playing Westbrook, not 40 minutes a night, like then all of a sudden you're
25. I don't even know.
22 and a half minutes again. Like this, if they pack all of his minutes into that small amount of time, like he can put forth that much more energy. And the Mavericks do the same thing with like a Daniel Gafford. He hasn't played more than like 20, 25 minutes a night normally when, and you'd think that the Mavericks would try and just stretch that as long as possible, but they've really tried to conserve him because they want that energy. They want that hustle. And so I think those are like the two main hustle guys for both teams, I think, is Westbrook and then Gafford. And do they stretch any of their minutes? Does it deteriorate some of their like hustle and athleticism and force and all that they play with? I'm fascinated with that. And then so Gafford is kind of that guy for the Mavericks, I think, that has become that like hustle force guy.
You talk about the bundled up energy though of Russ in that time. Sometimes it can have the negative effect where, Russell Westbrook is a guy, he's an emotional player. He only knows he's getting 15 minutes. So in those 15 minutes, he's just going so hard, looking to just force shots, and it can be a disaster sometimes. It can really be a disaster. I think what makes him so much more comfortable, and you saw this against the Suns last week, when knows he's getting time, and especially when he's surrounded by a Paul George or Kawhi to start games, he becomes more of that facilitator. And I really love that version of him because he still has the passing chops, but he does not have the same scoring chops he once had. So that's something with Russ to watch. Going back to Zubac, though, I want to mention part of the reason the Clippers slumped so hard, too, in March and in the beginning of April was Zubac got injured. And our backup. So if the Mavericks successfully play Zubac off the floor this time, it's not looking as good as last time at all. I think the Clippers need Zubac to actually be big in this series or good in this series, or they're not going to win because we don't have a small ball lineup that's played over 35 minutes together. Like a 5-man unit has not played over 35 minutes together. The best Clippers unit by net rating this season is the James Harden, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Zubac, the 4 starters, but instead of Terrence Mann, Norman Powell. Because Norman Powell, he's actually been our second most consistent. I can't believe I didn't mention that when you asked what's different. He is awesome. Norman Powell has been the second most consistent player, not even scorer, most consistent player this season for the Clippers after Kawhi. And I have a feeling Dallas fans are going to despise him by the end of this series, no matter how it goes. He's just so efficient.
The difference between Norman Powell and Tim Hardaway Jr. on paper shouldn't be that much, but it really is. Like, it's a real big difference in the way that they can get shots and I think that can be a big difference too. I got asked on a different like non-locked on podcast recently, is Tim Hardaway Jr. the X factor in a potential Clippers series? And I was like, it's actually better for the Mavericks if Tim Hardaway Jr. doesn't play that much, like that they don't all of a sudden need him and are like, oh, we just desperately need offense, so we're going to throw him out there, right? If if the Mavs are working in the way that they need to be working, it's defense first, and then it's Luka and Kyrie creating just enough offense to make it work, and they have, because they've created amazing offense. And so, but it's the defense.
Coming up, the conversation continues, learning more about the Mavericks, learning more about the Clippers, the matchup. Let's keep on going. Coming up, I got to tell you a little something about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
The small ball thing is so interesting because that's been such a staple of what the Clippers have done the last couple of years, and to the chagrin of Clippers fans, I think, of like being known for that. But for the Mavericks, you've got Gafford at center. They're like a +6 net rating with Gafford at center. With Lively at center for the whole season, they're at +5.5. So like pretty good with both of them. With Maxi Kleber and PJ Washington at the 4 and the 5, so no other center on the floor. That's kind of their small ball, even though Maxi is like a 6'10", big or whatever. That's sort of their small ball unit. They're a +19.5 net rating. Like, they've outscored teams. And yeah, their schedule was kind of soft to end the season, but there's wins against the Nuggets in there, the Kings twice, the Warriors twice, like the Heat twice. There's a lot of solid wins in there. And this lineup, I think the Mavericks small ball unit is better than the Clippers this season. And I think if it goes down to that, I'm fascinated to see, like, does that hold up? And does that, the way that the numbers look right now, does that hold up in the same way that it has in the regular season?
Yeah, it probably is. I will say, though, it'll be interesting to see if we see the small ball unit for the Clippers have their best moments in the playoffs. We haven't practiced it too much, but there is a chance. I mean, PJ Tucker and Kawhi have been the people that have been playing the small ball 5 because our options besides Zubac, they don't have the rim protection. Mason Plumlee and Tice. I mean, Tice works hard, but he's 6'8". Mason Plumlee, for whatever reason.
We've got one of those. His name is Dwight Powell.
For whatever, yeah, exactly. But I like Tice though. For whatever, I think he should play over Mason. But the thing about Mason Plumlee is he is an absolute free layup for teams. It seems like at the rim. I don't know what it is, but he has poor timing. He has no rim protection in his game at all. At least not this version that we've had on the Clippers of Mason Plumlee. So if Zubac does not play heavy minutes or play a good amount, the Clippers might be in trouble because the small ball 5s, as I said, Kawhi and PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker has not been a consistent part of the rotation this season. I don't even know if he should play in this series because Dallas, this Dallas Maverick team has been the fastest paced Dallas team in the Luka era, correct? I mean, I noticed it when I watched, but yeah, exactly. So PJ Tucker, he just adds to our main issue, which is slow and unathletic and old. He's all those things.
Yeah, his pace is very interesting this season. It was something that they talked about in training camp that they really wanted to push. They really wanted to. You saw it at the end of last season when Luka would play. They play the slowest pace in the league. They've been doing it for multiple years, slowest in the league. And it worked well in the playoffs because everything slows down in the playoffs anyway. And so the Mavs were like primed and ready against the Clippers and then against the Jazz and the Suns and in the next couple years to slow it down and to play super hyper efficient in the half court and all that. And the Mavericks can still do that. They're I think they're like top 5 or whatever in half court offense this season. But what they've also done is they've gotten into Luka's head. Hey, let's match some of what Kyrie is bringing to the floor. Because Kyrie, when he came in at the end of last season, he would come on the floor and push the pace. And when then it would be Luka's team, and Luka's team would be super slow. And it was like watching 2 different basketball teams on the same roster and sometimes with the same players. They're just taking the cue from their star player. And so they've kind of molded those and meshed those together where Luka now is always, he gets the ball off of an outlet or gets the ball off of a made basket and is just always looking up. He's always looking up ahead, and he'll throw those hit-ahead passes. I mean, first game that they have Gafford, They're playing OKC, really good defensive team, like great defensive team. Luka looks down the court and chucks the ball like in the end zone to Gafford with like Jalen Williams on him. And Gafford just goes up and catches it and dunks it. And you go, man, they're like really looking ahead. And Luka's really trusting these guys to just catch some of these really tough passes. And I don't think they'll be able to do stuff like that in the playoffs necessarily, but I think they will try and push the pace more. The problem is, like, if the Mavs try and push the pace, especially with Westbrook, I think you get beat. Because he's one of the best at that. And the way he pushes the pace for the Clippers has been really effective. But then when you get him stuck in the half court, it's like almost the opposite. It's like when he gets stuck in the half court, it's not as effective as when he's out in transition.
We don't get out and run that much since we traded for James Harden. I mean, it really has slowed things down. He does do a
Part of it, yeah.
right. He does do a good job of those hit-ahead passes as well. James Harden's always been good at that. But for the most part, things slow down. And in the slump that he had, there were possessions where he'd come up the court and he's taking 12 seconds off the shot clock, before we even get into anything really. And
sorry.
No, go ahead.
The other part about the Mavs pace is that Kyrie will just like step up and take a real quick pull-up three in like at the beginning of the shot clock because somebody just like fell asleep and didn't come up and pick him up. And Luka does the same thing. And like it's not really a fast break possession, but it turned into one because they just caught the team not super prepared to pick them up at half court.
I figured one of the reasons why the Mavs pushed the pace is because Kyrie's pull-up threat, big time. But as far as I was thinking about something, though, as you were talking, I do think there is an avenue where the Clippers can actually have a good small ball lineup that they haven't practiced too much. The thing is, my biggest fear with these small ball lineups is having Norman Powell and James Harden on the floor together because they're the two weakest defenders that the Clippers have in the rotation, James Harden and Norm. And they're in that amazing lineup, our highest net rating lineup, the Powell Rangers lineup, as our radio host and his boys on their podcast call it. Norman Powell, James, Kawhi.
Powell Rangers?
Yeah, James, Kawhi, Paul, Norman, Zoo. They light teams up at the end of games because you still have the roll threat of Zoo in the screening, and then you have, James Harden, Norman Powell, Kawhi, and Paul. And that's some amazing offensive firepower right there. Yeah. But if we have Westbrook with Kawhi and Paul, and then like Amir Coffey and Terrence Mann, I think that wouldn't be too bad. Or even you asked me about this off camera. Have the Clippers played with the big name players much after they've taken Westbrook out of the starting lineup? And the answer is no.
That first game against the Mavs this year, they started those guys.
And it was a disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, they haven't played them much together, the four of them, but they have figured out that they can be played together, but not usually with the center, not with a non-spacer. So maybe you'll see those 4 plus Norman Powell or those 4 plus Terrence Mann or Amir Coffey at some point, but it'll be interesting to see if we ever try those 4 with Zoo. I doubt they do because there's just so much bad data on it. And then eye test-wise is not good because Harden, when he's in, he has the ball in his hands the most. He averages 19 more touches per game than the next highest guy on the team. I checked that on the NBA tracking.
Like point guard. He'll take it out from.
Right. Whereas, and then when you take Westbrook off the ball, as you said, when you're playing a half-court game, James Harden running the controls, Westbrook's kind of stashed in the corner. He's a fantastic cutter, or he's become a more proactive cutter as a member of the Clippers, but you're just not really maximizing what he does great. So that mixed with Zoo hurts the spacing, and that's why they haven't done it.
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup. I'm fascinated to see what happens. I think the other thing about the Mavericks that we haven't really gotten to today is Dante Exum. He's been amazing for the Mavericks this season. Just an amazing pickup on a minimum coming over from the EuroLeague. Before he went over to the EuroLeague, he was not a good three-point shooter. This year, he shot 50% from three. And quite literally won multiple games for the Mavericks with just some really clutch shots that if he isn't there, he hit 7 threes against the Lakers in one game. He hit the 3 to tie the game to go into overtime against the Rockets the other day in that comeback win. He's had just he scored like 20 points a game when Kyrie was out in December when he was out with some injuries. Like Dante Exum has been really good. The Mavericks offense destroys when Dante Exum and Luka and Kyrie. It's like 132 points per 100 possessions when those three are on the court together. It's not a huge sample size, but they've kind of held him back and held his minutes down a little bit. But he's sort of been that X factor. So if there is sort of like you talked about Norman Powell being that guy. I think probably Dante Exum is that guy for the Mavericks to be that extra ball handler to the release valve for Luka or Kyrie. and then to hit some open shots. I mean, just so big. And then his defense has been solid. You saw it in some of those Clippers games too this season. That he can kind of defend any of the four, really. I mean, some better than others, but like he can, and that's a huge thing for the Mavericks in their rotation.
I see Dante Exum guarding James Harden a good amount in this series.
Yeah.
But, ultimately for me, James Harden, this is a huge series for him because, especially in those starting lineups, the start halves, you do probably have Kyrie Irving guarding you for the most part. And I know Kyrie Irving's been better defensively and Luka's been better defensively this year. But the main thing for the Clippers is you got to get those two guys to guard. You got to get those two guys to guard. You got to put them in the action. You got to make them work, tire them out as best you can. So that's my biggest thing as far as offensively. I also want to ask, how's Gafford's rim protection been? Because I see in the games he's definitely blocking some shots, but relative to I guess other great rim protecting centers in the NBA.
Yeah, the Mavs is not necessarily trying to funnel people to the rim necessarily, and so they're not doing that in the same way that other teams do. And so he's been good though, like at the rim. He's so strong at the rim. He's huge, rebounding, and that's something that the Mavericks have really struggled with in the past is finishing possessions. I mean, I can even think about Clippers possessions against the Mavericks where the Clippers got a couple of offensive rebounds in a row because of big wings and big guards, and then you're just like, oh, over and over, the Mavs can't finish these possessions. But with Gafford, that's not been a problem at all. His rim protection, I think, has been solid, and he's just like a deterrent. He's the guy that even if he knows it's going to be a goaltend, he'll just swat it anyway, just to like get it in your head, right? Like, and the Mavericks haven't really had anybody like that in a while. But yeah, Gafford's rim protection has been solid. But just to have PJ and Derek Jones Jr. and the Mavs playing that switching, rotating, like everybody has to stay connected kind of defense has really been the big change for them. Is that when Luka and Kyrie are both locked in and they're both trying really hard, they can both be pretty decent defenders. And so if that's the case, then you don't have like such a weak link in the five. And that's been the reason why the Mavericks defense has been one of the best in the league the last couple months of the season.
It'll be something to watch, but that's it for the first part of the episode. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let us know your series predictions in the comments. And, of course, make sure you subscribe to both channels for all things Clippers, Mavs in the playoffs going forward. Any last words for now?
See you tomorrow.